Everybody. Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Lent, or the Lenten Survival Guide, however you want to say it. Uh, I am Crystal Getz, and I'm here to talk about the things that we need to journey along in the desert with Jesus today. So, if you joined us last time, you know that we have first our backpack, and our backpack has to be empty because if it's full of other stuff, we don't have room for anything on our journey. Plus, we don't have room for Jesus, right? If you're a teenager, if you've ever been to a United Methodist dance, you know, they always say when you dance, always leave room for Jesus. So you don't, get a little too friendly with your dancing partner. And our first item that we put in the backpack was this bottle of water, because water is one of the most important things you can have when you're in the desert in order to survive. And if I were going out to the desert for a day, I could survive with this. Depending, I mean, you need about this much minimum every day to survive. But something you need almost as much of is what we're going to talk about today. And that is forms of shade. Okay. And some of you, this is from the Tacoma Rainiers baseball team, but some of you know this story where Jesus gets baptized. He goes out into the desert for 40 days to pray and to fast. And then he's tempted by the devil in the desert. So we're talking about avoiding temptation a lot, but we're also talking about desert survival. So ultimately, if you one of the ways people die in the desert is from exposure. And exposure means too much sun. You know, you're just in the sun too much. So there's several things you can use for shade. And even if you have one, you think of these as um, for uh, for rain, but and I'm not going to keep this up very long, but they work really great for shade too. There was this little thing back in Victorian and Edwardian days called a parasol, and that was strictly made to keep the sun off your head. So I'm going to put this down now because um, excuse me. But a hat to keep the sun off your head and sunglasses work really well too. One of the things that can happen in the desert is that if you get too much sun on your head, it can raise your body temperature and it helps you evaporate moisture. So that this kind of ties in with the water a little bit in that um, it doesn't help you make the water last. If you're evaporating too much water because you're too hot, then you're that water is only going to last half as long as it would. You shouldn't, your body has to work harder to keep itself cool when you're in direct sunlight like that. I was reminded of a movie I saw years ago called The Flight of the Phoenix. I don't know if you've ever seen it, the original 1965 version with Jimmy Stewart. And it was about a group of guys that are on a plane trip to Benghazi. Okay, they're going to Libya. I don't remember where they're going from, but it's not a far journey. But there's a sandstorm and it blows them off course, and then the sand gets in the engines and they crash land in the middle of the desert, and they're far away from where anybody would be looking for them. So they have to survive out in the desert, and all kinds of things happen. But and one guy wanders off into the desert unprepared because he wants to go after this guy that has gone for help. Okay, and he didn't take anything with him, and he's seeing things after a while. He's seeing a fake oasis with pretty women and beautiful pond and palm trees, and it was a paradise for him. And he died there drinking sand because he saw something that wasn't really there. And that's what can happen. Your mind starts to play tricks on you when you get too warm. Also, when you're out in the desert, if you can find a way to make shelter of some kind, and there's lots of ways to do that to just stay out of the sun, which is look for shade, natural shade that the dunes make or the rocks. Or perhaps there's a way you can pile up some sand and make a formation that you can move around during the day to stay out of the hot part of the sun, and then do your active work at night or in the evening or in the morning, right before it starts to get really hot or really cold. Because in the desert, it can get very cold at night too. I know it's a very harsh place. So, finding ways to shelter yourself in the desert is one way to survive. And we also need to think about how we can shelter ourselves in our current lives. I mean, COVID-19 and our isolation can be thought of as a metaphorical desert. It can be thought of that we're kind of isolated and alone. We don't know when we're going to get out, and we have limited resources, and we need to learn to get through this. And so the shade is, I can't even tell you. I wrote this down because um, almost all of the Psalms in the Bible mention God being the shelter. God, you are my shelter. You are my strength and my shield. All these things, and most of the Psalms mention God in this way, and a lot of Isaiah, the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament, mentions that too. Um, if you think of God in terms of being your shelter, how would you call upon God to be your shelter in this time? How could you access that shade, right? How could you access God's shelter? I think one of the ways to do that is by praying and by reading scripture or renewing some of the things that you have looked at in the Bible before. Maybe remembering all those stories that you listened to as a child that you loved about Noah or about Moses and those darn Israelites out in the desert. I mean, you want to talk about a story that is very pertinent to our times. That's the one. Or just the amazing story of Jesus. And this over the next few weeks as we get ready for Easter and Palm Sunday, we're going to need all the tools in our tool belt we can. So before we go today, we're going to put our forms of shade in our backpack with our water so that they can be with us on our journey. All right. So until next time, let's try to survive together in the desert during Lent. Take care, everybody. Have a really great next couple days, and I'll see you on Thursday. It's Monday.